launch and of course Harley Davidson's re-entry into India, we are beginning with a quick check of the stock markets. The stock markets continuing on a roll, and the Sensex today closing above the 65,600 mark, and the Nifty too scaling new highs. Suyash, talk to us. This is just stopping at all.
Yeah, so the benchmarks opened today with moderate gains, but so they were expected to have a strong, a flattish opening because of the because of some profit booking after a 1 week rally, and the Asian markets were also trading in the red. But Indian markets still opened higher, and it briefly did dip in the red, but bulls came back to the rescue and powered the benchmarks to new lifetime highs. Now, the 30-share Sensex has a lifetime high of 65,672 and ultimately settled at around 65,487 levels, up 0.43%. Now, Nifty, on the other hand, was up 0.34% and closed at about 19,389 levels. Now, this was a 6th consecutive session of gains for the Nifty index, its longest winning streak since April 24. In the same time, the index has now surged about 4%, and it has outperformed most developed markets and emerging markets. In fact, in the first half of calendar 2023, Nifty has surged about 6%, and this is despite of the strong headwinds in the form of aggressive rate hikes, the banking turmoil in the US and Europe, the political and the geopolitical events and credit warnings. Now, today's rally was primarily driven by financials and the IT stocks. Nifty PSU Banks was once again the top gainer among sectoral indices on NSE. It was up about 1.89%, followed by Nifty IT, which also rose about 1.04%. On the other side, Nifty Realty, Nifty Auto, Nifty Oil and Gas ended today's session in the red. Now, among individual stocks, Bajaj stocks, both Bajaj Finance and Bajaj Finserv, were the top gainers in the Nifty pack today, rising 7.19% and 5.8% respectively. Hero MotoCorp, Tech Mahindra, Dr. Reddy's Lab were some of the other gainers in the Nifty pack. On the other side, Eicher Motors was a top loser today, falling as much as 6.31%, followed by Bharti Airtel, which was down 1.59%.
Right, so that's a wrap-up of the stock markets for the day. The momentum just continuing unabated because the long-term India story continuing to remain solid. Thank you, Suyash, for joining us. And with that, we wrap up our market check section. We'll be bringing this to you every day, even as the market is just closed before we begin the show. And now it's time to move away from that and move on to the big stories that we're tracking for you. We begin with the Jio Bharat phone. I'm sure you've heard everything about it. 250 million people in India are still on 2G services. Yes, believe it or not, 250 million people. And to move them from their 2G experience and catapult them to the 4G experience, that's what the Jio Bharat 4G phone is expected to do. And also, more importantly, this particular phone comes with certain specifications. It works only on the Jio network. And second, it starts with a basic minimum plan that is much lower than its peers, and that is driving fears in the hearts of all those competitors as to how low telecom charges, data charges, and voice and call charges are supposed to go. That's the debate that the Jio Bharat phone has kicked up. But the fact of the matter is that it is meant to take internet and fast internet services to those who have not been serviced by it so far. And this phone comes under the coveted under 1,000 rupees or sub 1,000 rupee price point, because this has been priced at 999 rupees. We have some special guests set to join us to help us understand what Jio Bharat could do to the telecom business in the country, to telecom industry in India. We have Mr. Dilip Cherian. We have also Mr. Srinath Sridharan joining us on the broadcast. Thank you, gentlemen. Just coming to you in a minute or so, we have my colleague Karthik Malhotra also joining us here in the studios. Karthik, thank you so much for taking time out. Talk to us. The Jio Bharat phone, much has been debated about it. Yes, on one hand, it brings internet and mobile connectivity to a huge audience who are yet unserved by fast, updated internet services. At the same time, it is reigniting the already contentious price wars.
Absolutely, Krishna. And 250 million is no small number, and I think it just goes on to show that whatever Reliance does through Jio, through retail, through any other platform that it starts, it goes for a mass carpet bombing. It doesn't restrict itself to a niche audience. And as we discussed in the morning, the hits just keep on coming. And here we have a 999 rupee phone. What is it offering? At 123 rupees a month, which is a good 30% lower than, let's say, competitor Airtel starting pack, entry-level pack at 175 rupees a month. This 123 rupees a month pack offers you unlimited voice calls, and add to that, not 1 GB, not 2 GB, not 5 GB, not 10 GB, 14 GB of data. This is 7 times more than what Airtel offers in its entry-level pack. So up until now, and incidentally, Lloyd has also, I've been told, joined us now. Lloyd Mathias is also with us. And the last time around that we were discussing price wars in the telecom space, we were talking about Vodafone perhaps not taking off again and acquiring customers. And we were thinking about a situation where India's telecom sector is moving towards a duopoly. Yesterday, Ashwini Vaishnav, the minister, came on record and said that BSNL is also getting revived. We have Kumar Mangalam Birla really trying to resurrect Vodafone and get some customers back, get the books in order, get some fresh funds infused. But it seems to me all of that is going to go in vain, and we are not talking about the duopoly now. We are possibly looking at a monopoly with Reliance Jio.
Right, possibly a monopoly with Reliance Jio. We have a very special panel of guests joining us as well, as Karthik was rightly pointing out. We have Mr. Lloyd Mathias, we have Mr. Dilip Cherian, and we have Mr. Srinath Sridharan as well. Thank you all three of you gentlemen for taking time out to be with us. I'm going to quickly begin with Mr. Dilip Cherian. Mr. Dilip Cherian, talk to us, the Jio Bharat phone. One, from a phone's perspective, what it would do to, device costs as well. We are not discussing that. And of course, the entire telecom quandary, companies complaining that, they need to be charging better prices for voice and data to make some kind of money. And here you have, Reliance Jio bringing it down to 123 rupees with 14 GB.
For a long time, that the phone in the hand is getting to be almost as powerful as the button on the ballot box. The fact is that this 250 million market that Jio is targeting is a market that has been underserved by everybody. Device prices is only one thing, but what really is the game changer is the quantum of GBs packed into this price point. Essentially, what it means is that we are going to create a nation of browsers, and I hope that they are browsing interesting, good stuff which takes them forward rather than just whiling time away with gaming. So the fact is that this is it moving towards a monopoly? I don't think so. I think you will have a minimum of a duopoly in a country like this. There are opportunities, there are niches, there are also mega markets, and everybody will have to make sure that they craft both a hardware and a software offer and a kind of package which makes sense. There's no reason why other players have to make their own imaginative offers, and the market will only benefit as a result of this.
All right, market will only benefit as a result of it. Mr. Lloyd Mathias, if I can come to you on that, tell us price wars in the telecom space. You already have the competitors, crying, about how much, data and voice call costs are so low here in India. And now you have Jio coming in, bringing it down even further, but at the cost of an important social good.
Yeah, I think this is one more step in, say, Jio's large disruption plans. I think we all know what they did back in 2016-17, which really benefited the country. They actually democratized the internet when they dropped prices and made voice calling free. And that, on the back of that, a whole range of internet services spread out nationally, right? Whether it was e-commerce, whether it was, food ordering online, whether it was ordering cab services. So I think they did that first level of disruption. What we saw in the last 2 years with the market boiling down largely to two large players was that the growth in users seemed to have kind of slowed down quite substantively into 2020. I think this is the next step. And, to use a classic Reliance strategy, this is the next step in their disrupting and dominating the market. Having said which, it's not all bad. I think they truly are democratizing the market. When you're talking of 250 million customers who are not on the internet, who are using feature phones, and therefore devoid of a range of services, I think bringing them into the fold, getting them to move to kind of 4G services, or at least avail of basic internet offerings, is going to be huge, because on the back of that, that helps a lot of other plays to develop, a lot of other digital plays. And more importantly, I think what Reliance is clearly doing is using the power of the play they have across sectors. So what they're clearly saying is that packaged with this phone, which will work only on a Jio network, will also be a range of Jio services, right? Whether it's Jio Shopping, Jio Cinema, Jio Savan, their music service. So I think they're kind of building a small closed door ecosystem at the bottom of the pyramid, quite like, let's say, Apple does, let's say, that with the top, maybe a few 100 million users in the world.
Right.
I think this is Jio's strategy, and I think it's hugely powerful and, in a sense, beneficial to India. Obviously, we need to watch for a developing of a monopoly or, maybe a duopoly, which is not desirable in a country as large as ours.
Right, fair enough, fair enough. Stay with us. Srinath Sridharan, you're talking about that, Apple kind of, hardware and software. We're not yet talking about the Jio Bharat OS or the operating system that comes with these phones. This is a made in India OS, and in fact, another Indian OEM or an Indian original equipment manufacturer, mobile manufacturer like Carbon is set to, take on the Jio Bharat OS as well. And that's very fascinating.
I mean, it is fascinating for a couple of counts. As Lloyd said, geofication kind of changed the pace of digital adoption that we're all using today. Imagine if geofication did not happen, how would we have actually crossed COVID? I mean, most of our consumer segments would not have had access to that kind of digital. And I think it's technology inclusive. And to me, one of the focus I want to drive is the recent agreement that India and the US tied up about collaborating on digital public infrastructure. I mean, imagine what could it do to Bharat OS, or what could it do to what I call the 25 crore DLT consumers, digitally lagging telecom consumers. The 2G segment, I call them as digitally laggard telecom consumers. And if you can shift them, there is a dedicated business that one could drive. We have been speaking about bottom of the pyramid, but I think this is the first time we're hearing about bottom of the digital pyramid. I think it's fascinating. I mean, it could have lots of offerings, whether it's entertainment, education, business, commerce, MSME, so many things are possible on this. But it will be interesting also to, Krishna, you must remember, India has more keypad literate consumers in the last few decades, rather than actually formally literate consumers. So I think it's a brilliant strategy of Jio to get consumer. I think over a point in time, they'll be able to do many products. And as Mr. Cherian said, if other competition do not think of these and come up, I mean, why should the industry, why should the consumers be blamed? We would benefit rather benefit. I think to me, it's not a price war. It's not a perception war. I think it's a great new product offering that they've figured out in a newer DLT segment.
Lloyd, do you agree this is not going to result in a price war? And linked to that, do you think competitors like Airtel can look at perhaps a 30% reduction in ARPU when they are in fact trying to increase data plan rates? So is this going to be viable to not compete on prices?
Well, Krishna, we saw how the stock market reacted to Airtel. So clearly the pressure is going to be on Airtel. There is a clear concern about a lot of consumers at the bottom of the pyramid who are presently on, let's say, Airtel plans switching over, just given the fact that, when it comes to a like-to-like price comparison, this is a no-brainer. But as it always happens, I think it will also force competition to react and be more innovative. Right. And that's precisely the game that Reliance has played. Right. They've jumped into a market, they disrupt the market, they start to dominate the market, and then slowly everyone follows and gets their own share. And as long as it's a 2 or 3 player market, I think there's enough room for everyone. India has a large enough market. I think for the future, we need to have at least 3 or 4 significant telecom players. The worry is that right now there are 2. But having said which, just like Srinath just mentioned, I think what it can do when you have 1 billion Indians who have access to the internet and therefore a range of services, right from digital public goods to a range of entertainment options, right? We've seen what short format video has done. I think this opens up the market to a range of possibilities. right? This is something, let's say in olden times, you'd expect governments to do, to actually help people at the bottom of the pyramid get to a digital infrastructure. We talked of the Bharat Infranet. I think this has kind of jump shifted all that. And therefore, possibly in the end of a year or two, we'll have close to about the billion number. We had kind of got stuck at between 600 billion Indians, so to speak, on the internet, who at least could use some kind of messaging. Now, this can actually stretch that number all the way down. And as Srinath said, this breaks the literacy divide, right? If people with their new 4G phones can speak up messages in their vernacular language, that even breaks the language divide. So I think, truly, to my mind, this is one of the big disruptions. Right. It can really change the face of the internet economy in India. And I think it's full marks for Jio for enabling this.
Ms. Cherian, I want to bring this to you. Okay, if it's not a price war, my question is this. So it's going to bring down costs for data and voice across the board, and which means that somebody in a city of a different socioeconomic strata and used to certain level of telecom services is going to be paying the same rate for data and voice as somebody who's just moving from 2G to 4G. Will that make sense? Or do you, in that scenario, will you even look at differential pricing depending upon geographies?
I think the democratization that both Srinath and Lloyd have talked about is one part of the story. Yes, they will be paying lower prices actually than people in some metros, and that's fine, and that is the way it should be. But I think the real game changer is going to be the Jio platform, which I think after the US visit by the Prime Minister is aching to get new markets. So I think this market is no longer enough. This is proof of concept for them. And the fact that they are able to confine you to one network and give you a price which is beguiling will allow them to geopolitically, and here I'm not using the pun for geopolitically access markets which they never thought of accessing before. And this will be a game changer for India as a country, because the Jio platforms, as it were, will be then ready for expansion into new markets across the globe, which has not happened so far from any of our domestic players, except to Africa.
All right.
If I could just add a point to, I think, what Dilip rightly said, and I think that's a great point, Dilip. I think in a sense, it's also that second level of disruption. Back in the early 2000s, we talked about how Airtel engineered the disruption of outsourcing services, right? You no longer own the network, so to speak. You own the consumer, right? All the BTSs, all the network operations were outsourced to third party. I think this, in a sense, this bundled package of low-end offerings and therefore reaching a larger thing is, as Dilip said, a next level of disruption. And not only can it be a great game changer for India, but over time, this could be a template and a model that could be exported across the developing world, so to speak. So I think, I totally endorse that.
Right, could be, it's not just for India, but could be exported as well. I also wanted to ask about this entire environment and the platform that you were talking about. Karthik and I in the studios will be discussing, most of the users of 4G, you will not be able to leverage it if you can't, take that mobile phone and tether that internet connection to your laptop or your tablet, if somebody were to get access to that. Otherwise, it just remains in that phone, and that screen is too small for it to become, useful in multivarious ways in which internet can be put to use. Yes, it can be used. It comes pre-installed with that UPI, connection, which is very, very important. You can make digital payments with that phone. But the fact of the matter is that to be used for education purposes, for internet to be put to use for other purposes, that internet will have to be tethered, will have to come with the ability to be tethered. Srinath, if you can take that.
Sure. I think that's not a great problem as well. Very simply put, Krishna, today access to, whether it's tethering to other devices, I think over a point in time they'll come out with it. But more critically, if it can solve for the frequency of battery being recharged, that's a crucial one if you look at the bottom of the pyramid segment, right? How quickly or how frequently will that particular handset last with a 4G connection? How frequently will it need battery to be recharged? And as we move to the interiors of India, despite all the conversations about power access, do they get access to power their mobile? That's what I think I would worry more about that than about tethering. Tethering is a market-driven solution, which players will figure out. If not Jio, others will figure out and provide solution.
Fair enough.
However,
I was only asking because this whole thing at this cost is being provided only with Jio, and it clearly locks you into only the Jio network. Which means that if you geo position your internet service and give it to a particular geography, in that geography for it to get maximum usage, fair enough. If Jio can get us to this stage, I'm sure they can find ways to tether it as well. That's the answer coming from Srinath. Fair point taken. If I can bring this back to Mr. Dilip Cherian, the attempt at this is not the first time you're looking at attempts at an ultra low cost phone. We've had examples of ultra low cost phones being released before, but this is the first time it's a sub 1,000 rupee phone, Mr. Cherian. So in that sense, how does this compare? This is called the V2 or the version 2. How does this one compare to, say, the version 1 of the ultra low cost phone that Reliance had put out?
I haven't had my hands on this phone yet, understandably, but if its user experience is not great, just because it's aimed at the bottom of the pyramid, it ain't gonna work. So the fact that they've brought out V2 is a recognition that Jio understands that along with brand, along with bandwidth, along with everything else, you've got to make sure that your user experience is of the quality that people are used to. Don't forget that many of the buyers of this phone will have used somebody else's phone and will understand what the experience they want is. So I'm sure that when they launch this phone, they would have done pretty destructive testing in terms of what the user interface is like. If it works well, it's a bonanza. If it doesn't, it's back to the drawing board.
Dilip, I want to come in here, and you are an image guru, you're an image consultant. At this stage, it doesn't seem like Jio needs any image makeover. But what would be your advice to, let's say, Airtel to begin with, and even Vodafone and BSNL? I think Vodafone and BSNL in particular definitely need an image makeover right now. What would be the strategy that you would advise them?
Without mincing words, the first thing they need to do is get their own internal house in order. Both these companies have lapsed into a moribund state of just survival mode, and that isn't what today's 5G and 4G customers are looking for. They don't care whether your price is high or whether your niche is small. Whatever your niche, you've got to get in there and look like you're willing to do what it takes to dominate that market. That is my image advice for both of them.
Srinath, do you think that advice would be practical right now, given the state of affairs that especially Vodafone finds itself in? It doesn't have cash, it's looking for fresh investment. And 5G, leave alone dreaming about 6G, but even 5G seems like a far cry at the moment. So is there any merit in Vodafone actually sticking its feet into the game?
See, whether Vodafone sticks to it or not, the challenge is government is then stuck with Vodafone as well as BSNL. That's a sad reality. And in the technology game, if you don't keep upgrading technology, your devices and your software, you actually ultimately lose customers. As Mr. Cherian pointed out, just because they are the bottom of the pyramid customer doesn't mean you can actually give them poor service, poor network, or poor anything. So that's the challenge, that whether it's Vodafone, and I'm even including Airtel in the entire fray, how are they going to actually roll up their sleeve and come with better product and actually better delivery? Just a case in point, when 5G was rolled out, most of them were even suffering from rolling out proper network in main metro cities. The signal was patchy. They were not able to deliver 5G across, let's say, the top 4 cities. So that's a lesson that if you really want to hold on to your customer, ARPU aside, first deliver those services. And I think it's a challenge. And both Airtel and Vodafone face this.
Lloyd, what do you think? Is Reliance Jio pretty much inching closer day by day with every new data plan, every new feature phone that they announce? Are they moving inch by inch closer to even bleeding out Airtel?
I think it's $1 million question. But in a kind of short summary, if I could, I think Reliance have always played, like I said, the disrupt first and then dominate the strategy. And using their deep cachet of funds from allied businesses, right? That's what they did back in the time with the DMT, PTA, then with the petroleum and oil refining business. And of course, then we've seen it in telecom and to an extent in retail. I think sooner than later, I think two things need to happen. One is clearly the Competitive Commission may need to take a look. Given what they're saying about the Bharat phone, they're talking of bundling a range of services. For example, this phone is ostensibly meant to work with Jio Pay. And therefore, I'm not sure if it's going to work with the other payment services, right? So it works with Jio Pay. It works only on the Jio network. It'll have pre-bundled offerings from Jio Savan with music. It'll have pre-bundled offerings from Jio Cinema. So I think they try to build a small walled garden circle. Like I said, almost like what Apple did when they first started off with the iTunes and the Apple Music interface. So I think they try to do that. I think sooner than later, given the fact that some of the investments they've made are so far ahead of their competitors, I think the Competitive Commission will need to take a look. Parallelly, I think clearly there is room for some consolidation. I think Airtel can still up its game and still be a viable competitor. I think any telecom service in the world that has about 400 million consumers cannot be taken lightly, right? So Airtel is still a hugely massive company. I think the real problem arises with, shall we say, Vodafone Idea and BSNL. And as Srinath pointed, they both have a dominant government control. BSNL entirely owned by the government, but Vodafone Jio still has about 31% government stake. I think something needs to happen there for India to be a viable three-player telecom market. Anything less than a three-player, to my mind, is going to give unfair advantage to some of the existing players. And in this case, clearly there's one player that's stranding the market in terms of their ability to invest well ahead of the curve.
So what is, Dilip Cherian, what is that eureka moment that Vodafone and BSNL would be waiting for or would be trying to draw up on the drawing board? What is it that they need to specifically do right to come back in the game? Because this game is definitely not playing any cards, that Vodafone and BSNL could take advantage of.
My answer to that is pretty simple and straightforward. You need an iconic manager, a CEO with vision, and government to keep its hands off and only keep its pockets open.
Well, the government has opened pockets already to Vodafone and has kept its pockets open to BSNL. And from what I understand, government doesn't have too much intervention right now in day-to-day operations management of Vodafone, which in fact Kumar Mangalam Birla himself is spearheading, especially the...
So it needs that manager. So it needs that big vision manager with the aggression to do what it takes.
But without enough funding, I am not sure, Mr. Cherian, how far, even a new manager would be able to take it. So
that's why I said the pocket should be open. Government's pocket should be
But
open.
then does the government have any business in being the third player in a telecom market? Does it make sense for the government to be in the business of business?
As long as what Lloyd said, that a market this size, for the benefit of the consumer, needs more than two players, is something that is well understood by economists, marketeers, and policymakers, then it makes sense to do what it takes.
All right, fair enough. I think that makes sense. The government should continue infusing money till as long as Vodafone or BSNL become relevant stakeholders in at least a three-player market.
Fair enough. We're even having this conversation because of the Jio Bharat phone, Karthik, and the fact of the matter is that there was the Jio phone and there's a Jio phone next, and now we have the Jio Bharat
V2,
Jio Bharat V2 that we have, and Jio Bharat V2 is even happening after the fading success of Jio phone next. So my question here is, as Dilip and Lloyd and Srinath have been talking about, the phone has to be attractive to use, it has to be easy to use for consumers, and the success of the phone will go a long way, in helping us understand how much of a disruption this will take place. I just have being the devil's advocate, Mr. Lloyd Mathias, if I were to ask you, is there a chance that there's this entire question of disruption of or the re-disruption of India's telecom market is solely dependent upon the success of the Jio Bharat phone in the first place, and there's no guarantees for that?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a big first step, and as Dilip rightly said, I think a great UX. Usage interface, seamless usage is going to be table stakes, right? Consumers, even if they are first-time users, and as Dilip rightly pointed out, not many will be first-time users. Some will have used some other phone. I think the interface has to be absolutely seamless and positive. Also, given the fact that people from the bottom of the pyramid maybe slightly more tech challenged than, let's say, people in slightly more urban centers, just because of the learning curve. So I think that's important. But I do believe that all the things that they have mentioned in terms of what they plan to do, they're going very, very micro market. They're talking of 6,500 Teslas. So really marketing to the absolute bottom of the pyramid with a complete prepackaged solution, right? A phone built in with data, built in with a range of services. I'm told they're even building in a WhatsApp as part of the option. So there will be a chat option. I think is fairly positive, right? I think over time, it's just the ability of reaching a certain scale before the flywheel kicks in and really makes it very, very successful. So I have little reason to believe that it won't take off.
All right. If I were to ask the same question, Srinath, to you as well, being the devil's advocate, a lot depends upon a lot is riding on the success of the phone in question that we are talking about. It has to be more successful than the previous iterations launched by Reliance.
See, that's true. The initial stages, they've gone through their experimentation curve. They've made mistakes. They've learned from some of the initial Star or Spark handsets, which didn't really take off. But I think this is, to me, the maturity curve for Jio. I think 2016, when they kind of Jioification of data access was the first one. I think this could be the second one where I think it's far more deeper. I see this as Jio trying to create a bottom of the pyramid, almost Jio world for them. And if clubbed with their financial services, if it has Jio Pay and access to various financial services that Jio wants to do, it could be a game changer for them, not just from mobile telephony perspective, but also from a deeper engagement with Indian economy. I think it could be a long-term strategy of exactly what the Hindustan Rivers of the world spoke about, bottom of the pyramid, sachet model. I think this could be a big game changer of thinking about the taluks and also the pin code. The larger question is, just because they get it right, and if the other telecom players don't have the wherewithal to do it, it would be very unfair to call them a monopoly at that point of time, because the losers would be the consumers.
Karthik and Krishna, if I could just intervene for a second. So Srinath, their press note does talk about the fact that they're integrating UPI payments through the Jio Pay. So that's what the official release is.
That's there. The one thing I want to also ask Mr. Mathias and Srinath both is about what does all of this mean to Mr. Elon Musk and his plans of bringing Starlink to India? Because remember, that was also an effort to serve the unserved, remote, rural consumers of India. Mr. Mathias.
Well, I think this is one more step in that direction. I'm not sure how Starlink will seamlessly kind of work with this ecosystem. Because if you look at all the other significant players, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Google, I think they all have some financial infusion into this Jio platform, right? We saw all that happen in the latter half of 2020, right? When Jio did this mega tie-up with 13 different partners. As of now, none of Musk's entities are part of it. So I think that's a separate discussion. But I think anything that helps India jump shift technology, as Starlink rightly would, I think would work well, especially when you talk about the largest mass of humanity having access to digital services. And we're getting there. At reaching 1 billion internet users, we'll be pretty much up there with China, if not ahead of it.
All right. Mr. Srinath, the same question to you. Yes, and Starlink also takes a completely different technology. It's a direct satellite, based internet technology it plans to bring. There were a lot of questions on it either way, even without, Jio going ahead and disrupting the price strategy for internet services in the country. But tell us, does this effectively, mean that, Starlink, the arrival of Starlink will be that much more difficult? Do you see them coexisting?
I think they can coexist, but for two aspects. One, I think what's the skin in the game for the large Indian telecom companies? They're not going to make anybody's entry easy at all. They need skin in the game. And two, more importantly, how is the India and US geopolitical situation going to emerge? I mean, the last week's applause and great visit, all that is done, dusted. But how is it going to really shape up? I think that's the real challenge, not just about Starlink.
All right. Fair enough, Srinath and Mr. Mathias. We'll leave it at that. Srinath, stay with us and Mr. Mathias if you can, because we are moving away from Jio Bharat and what it can do in India to another iconic name and a brand. Must have heard of them. They're called Harley Davidsons. Until 3 years ago, Harley Davidson had stores in India. Today they don't. But they have a brand new Harley Davidson bike that is out for consumers in the Indian market. And that has been brought out in that joint venture alliance that Harley Davidson has with Hero MotoCorp in India. It's called the X440, and Harley Davidson is back in business in India, but how well can it compete this time around? Because last time around, the prices were so high that the entry-level Harley Davidson cost over 4 lakh rupees. But that's not the case with the brand new X440, because that has been priced at almost half of it, 2.3 lakh rupees. Karthik, fantastic price point for, first of all, Harley Davidson to release a new bike in the country, competing with the local Indian favorite, that's Royal Enfield.
Royal Enfield, true. And 2.3 is a little mouth-watering for a brand like Harley Davidson. If you could put your hands and get your hands on that Harley Davidson at a price point of 2.3 lakh rupees, I think it's definitely not going to be something that Royal Enfield or Bajaj Auto are going to like. But I think it definitely opens up a whole new gamut of options for biking enthusiasts, and of course the cult following that Harley Davidson has had in India, across the world. Now Indians especially will get easier access, cheaper access, if I may, to the Harley Davidson. And yeah, I think it's definitely good news, the fact that these Harley Davidsons are actually made in India. Harley Davidsons, they are being made at the Neemrana plant of Hero MotoCorp, and 440cc, so squarely competing in the 350cc and above category, but not the 975cc's that were earlier prevalent in India and are actually riding the waves across the world, which in India were also priced in excess of 7 lakh, 8 lakh rupees. So I think it's definitely a game changer.
Oh, game changer. It's mainly because the price point and the fact that it's a bona fide Harley, and it's a bona fide made in India Harley. You know, who would have thought, Srinath, who would have thought a made in India Harley Davidson, and at a price point that is mouth watering? Would you go for it, first of all?
No, not really. I mean, slightly different contrarian view. I think if you look at compared to all the price points, the young professionals will find it extremely exciting. But for an iconic brand like Harley, I mean, you would want what's available globally as the best and at a higher price point. It has to be a little aspirational. If today Ola or a Hither electric scooter is costing 1.2, 1.4 lakhs, to me, a Harley at 2.4 is great at 400cc, but for a young professional, not for those who want to claim that they've arrived. I mean, so this is exactly how probably Mercedes says we also have a A-class, or a BMW saying we also have a smaller variant. I think in my mind, Harley has a challenge. Are they mass affluent or are they aspirational? So I'm looking at it as slightly different, saying that they're going to find it a little difficult over a point in time to keep the HNI and the UHNI consumers engaged. How will they talk about engagement at the dealership level? How will they talk about special access, special events, and so on and so forth in the marketing engagement?
Well, you're talking about UHNIs, Ultra HNIs. You know, for an Ultra HNI, if you were to go, you know, had a choice between two iconic brands that he wants to keep in his, portfolio, which is like, say, be it a Ducati versus, a Harley Davidson. They're two different things altogether, but at the end of the day, they're iconic bike brands. I'm guessing then Harley still could make the cut.
I mean, Harley would make the cut, right? I mean, the Harley is an iconic brand. It has got a huge image. That's a reality. But by diluting the pricing point, how do they do it? I mean, very, very simple. I think the classic, the textbook case study of how Nokia also upgraded itself to Virtu. Would they have done it with a different brand, a sub-brand? I mean, that's where I'm kind of conflicted, saying, are they going to dilute their brand in the overall? Mouth-watering price points, the volumes offtake could tick off all the boxes from business perspective. The other aspect that we're not speaking about is it a business necessity for them to survive, to go mass affluent? Probably then that's a reality. Right. I think for Hero, it's a great, great strategy, right? I mean, they've got an iconic brand almost for a song.
Right. But that is what it seems to be, right? The case seems to be pretty the numbers globally and also in India. But globally also, Harley sales have been dwindling. And in India, in the 3 years that Harley was selling bikes in its own showrooms in India, and these were expensive bikes, right? The true Harleys that we knew of, the sales actually plummeted to a third by the time the third year ended, Srinath. So I think it is definitely a game of survival. It is about keeping the Harley brand alive in the mass affluent section, as you mentioned, while keeping the niche product, the ultra premium UHNI centric brand relevant for those who can afford it.
I mean, that's true, but will they stay interested and engaged in the same Harley brand? I mean, imagine if there are a million Harley Davidson bikes in India across Indian roads in the next couple of years. How would you feel paying 20 lakh rupees to get a Harley Davidson? I mean, it's exactly that. It goes back to the contradictory view that we have had. The amount of Mercedes and BMWs in Indian metros are increasing by number. So how much of it will still be more aspirational, which is why you're seeing the higher price points still coming into India by those brands. This is exactly the challenge. I think it's a great win for Hero, having kind of lost that Honda kind of franchise. For them, it's a great one. So are we seeing that at some point, sooner or later, an Indian company will acquire the global rights of global brand Harley? Probably. I mean, I would bet on that.
All right. Fair enough. Mr. Mathias, if I can come to you on that, the fact of the matter is that it's a made in India Harley Davidson. As far as the price point is concerned, here are my two bits. You had the iPhone, and look at the number of variations of iPhone. You have the basic iPhone, the mini iPhone, the Pro Max. It's for a premium product. They've been able to come out with so many variations. In that sense, Harley Davidson could take it from 2.3 right up to 10 lakh rupees if it wants to.
Absolutely. But I just want to come in with a slightly more different take on the entire pricing strategy. I think what Harley is done with this mouth-watering 2.3 lakh pricing strategy, and I'm not going to comment about what it does to the brand image, etc. I think it's following a strategy that a lot of global corporations look at in India. They look at India for the numbers, not so much for the gross margin. I just give two examples of two digital icons. India is Facebook's largest market by users, right? There are more Indians on Facebook than any other nationality in the world. Yet, India doesn't figure in the top 5 markets by revenue for Meta. India is world number 3 in the number of LinkedIn users. Yet, India doesn't figure in LinkedIn's top 10 markets by revenue. So, I would see a lot of global iconic brands, legacy brands, trying to look at that strategy, saying that this is too large a mass of humanity that we cannot not be in. And therefore, will have a presence through if I could call it a watered down version, low cost version, but we'll still look at earning our maximum profitability and gross margins for more developing markets. So you are priming a market that has a lot of humanity that over time is likely to grow more affluent and certainly afford your services, but you're keeping the brand alive. So my sense is there'll be a lot of brands, iconic legacy brands, that may have this kind of strategy saying, hey, you will have a 2.3 lakh bike while we are still selling the monster to, let's say, more ready and emerging markets. And of course, within India, you'll have that micro segment of really affluent people who want the real thing.
All right.
I just want to come in for a second, Krishna. It's 4:40 p.m. It's the X440 that we're talking about. And bookings incidentally opened at 4:40 p.m. today. This is news that has just come in. And I think any of our audience members who want to get their hands on this new X440 can log in and pay 5,000 rupees as booking amount. And deliveries are expected to arrive in the month of October. Back to you.
All right. Very important information that even as we continue discussing what it means. I just have a quick point to ask. Should Royal Enfield be worried, Srinath? Because 2,15,000 for a Royal Enfield and 2,30,000 for a Harley Davidson, just in case the traditional Indian consumer changes his or her mind?
No, not really. I think the traditional Indian, the classic brand, iconic brand of Enfield, the Royal Enfield's Bullet is very, very different from the Harley Davidson. So I wouldn't be worried about the price point at all.
Mr. Mathias, for the affluent, aspirational Indian looking to get an iconic bike, choice between Enfield and Harleys?
I think this price point will certainly make a significant impact in urban India, for where Harley is a large brand. There's certain, certainly say brand value, certain bragging rights, certain kind of badge value to owning a Harley. I think for the rest of India, where the Bullet has stood the test of time, has been around for years, will still continue. So I think there will emerge two segments. There will be a Harley fan following, and there will still be a Royal Enfield Bullet. So I must say that the market is still limited in that category.
All right. Also, bear in mind, there will be the Hero MotoCorp's version of the same bike, the X440, set to release later in the year as well. Just like how Maruti and Toyota, have the same platform cars with two different badges and two different brand names. We'll have to see how that pans out. And as Srinath is talking about how much does that water down the Harley Davidson brand further. We'll have to wait and watch on that. But I'm sure we'll get Srinath back again to discuss that when that version releases. But for now, Srinath Sridharan and Mr. Lloyd Mathias, wonderful having you gentlemen here on the show. We've completely run out of time here. And of course, my good friend Karthik, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Krishna.
That's a wrap here from my side. This is Krishna Kumar signing off. Keep it with News9.
Pakistan is actually genociding Baloch people. So being Baloch is a crime. If you are a Baloch, it means in the eyes of Pakistan, you don't have any right to live.
The Chinese and Pakistanis are colonizing the Baloch and exploiting their resources.
The Baloch armed struggle will continue unless China withdraws, Pakistan military withdraws from Balochistan and give Baloch complete authority to decide for themselves.
The Baloch feel that if they don't act now, they will become marginalized.
What lies ahead for Balochistan?
Balochistan, Bangladesh 2.0. This and more. Streaming on India's first OTT video magazine, News9 Plus. Download now.
BrahMos. Stealthy, lethal, precise. It flies at 3 times the speed of sound and cuts through a warship like a hot knife through butter. China's navy has threatened its neighbors, and they are turning to the BrahMos for protection. The warship killer. This and more streaming on world's first news OTT, News9 Plus. Download now.
Years ago, the COVID-19 pandemic brought the world to a standstill. This year, crowds are gathering at Delhi's Pragati Maidan to relive the joy of reading. The event, the New Delhi World Book Fair 2023.
People still want that touch and feel of a book, the smell of a book, what it means to hold a book in your hand.
With this, we are back with a new scale, with an enhanced scale.
I think, everyone's had more time to sit and plan the book fair more. And they're all the big names in here.
The reading habit is definitely on the rebound.
So, what's new at the World Book Fair 2023?
It's a wonderful thing that the entire book fair is under one roof, which has never happened. Earlier it was in silos in different pavilions, and there was no connectivity in between them. So some of the people used to miss out some of the content. Now it's being under one roof, the new world-class infrastructure at Pragati Maidan is ready. We are hosting it here. So it's a new beginning and a new layout. So anyone who enters in Pavilion 5 will get to see the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav theme. Who goes to 4 will have international exposure and G20 Pavilion. Who goes to Pavilion number 3 will have exposure to children activities in Children Pavilion. Who goes to 2 will have an exposure to Language Pavilion. And further we go up, we have a special pavilion for National Education Policy 2020. So this is the biggest education reform that has ever happened in India and across the world during COVID. So we are trying to showcase how this policy is going to become the foundation of the future of this country.
Meet the Author sessions are a hit with book lovers. On day 1, Nobel laureate Annie Ernaux's interaction with Nilanjana Roy drew an enthusiastic response.
The infrastructure is so wonderful that everything is happening under one roof, and it's also well laid out. And there are so many events happening because one is to display books, the other is also to bring authors and poets and scholars and others directly in contact with the readers. So I think there are these breakout zones, events, so on, which are happening through the day. That I think adds another flavor to the entire proceedings at the fair.
So one of the great things about a book fair is that I already know my favorite authors, right? So this is a chance for me to actually find new authors that I haven't seen, that I don't know about. So recently I was reading a book, it was based in West Bengal, and he uses the mythology of, uses a folk tale of Orissa. So while I was in one of the stalls, I think it was the National Book Trust, I saw folk tales of Orissa. So I picked up folk tales of Tamil Nadu, of course, and then, so you see, I would have never found these books if it wasn't a physical event where I am. Apart from that, I picked up Victory City.
I have come from Oman to the World Book Fair. This is my first time in the World Book Fair. I've always had all my books over. Amazed. I'm absolutely amazed to look at the bandwidth of writers, the bandwidth of talent that's just around. I'm just a speck, in this whole big thing, just a drop in an ocean. But I feel good that at least being a drop in the ocean helps somewhere or the other.
Ambassador and author Firat Sunel's interactive session was a tribute to India's vibrant language publishing scene.
I would like to talk about Firat Sunel. He is our Turkish ambassador here in Delhi, and he is an established fiction writer. He has 3 novels and already published in Malayalam, and his book will be available in Marathi, Bengali, Hindi, and very soon in English by Penguin India. So we are very excited about him since he lives here for some more years, and he has many good friends, like the writer friends, Indian friends, writers.
Wearing the hat of envoy as well as author with elan, Sunel swears by classical novelists such as Ernest Hemingway.
Why I like Hemingway's books? Because he traveled so many countries. He was in Cuba, he was in Africa, but that he was not just a tourist. He lived in these countries and he got all the details about these countries. And then when you read, for example, his stories in Spain, you think he's a person from Spain because his observation that was really not normal, so extraordinary. That's why I'm a fan of Hemingway.
Historian Sampath says the New Delhi World Book Fair matches up to its global counterparts.
First of all, the scale and the magnitude of the World Book Fair is something that is truly amazing. This is my first visit to the Delhi World Book Fair. Just a couple of months back, as part of a NBT delegation, we'd been to Paris, where India was the guest country, and here France is the guest country. And we were so taken in by the scale and the magnificent manner in which it had been laid out in Paris. I think this beats that several notches, just by the whole diversity, the range, the number of languages featured, both within India and also foreign languages. And what better way than to congregate in celebration of the world of books, knowledge and learning. So it's a wonderful experience to be here at the World Book Fair.
Tech-savvy readers may vouch for the convenience of a Kindle or e-books. But for the authors at the fair, there's no greater high than thumbing down the pages of a good old book.
It's just good to be back in a place where you can smell a book. In our world of media, we are so used to our phones and smartphones that we forget there's a smell of a book, and you can smell a lot of books here.
Digital thing has its own merits. It's easy, portable, you can take anywhere. But at the same time, reading a book, holding it in hand, feeling that smell and getting connected and